I really do think The War of the Worlds was the film that gave birth to the modern science fiction era.
The film was just, it was a colossal success.
AFI had 100 films in 100 years, the best films, and War of the Worlds was number 28.
When people think back in my career, that is what they talk about. They talk about War of the Worlds.
No one would have believed in the middle of the 20th century that human affairs were being watched keenly and closely by intelligences greater than man's. Yet, across the gulf of space on the planet Mars, intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic regarded our Earth with envious eyes, slowly and surely drawing their plans against us.
1953's The War of the Worlds, a pioneering classic in the science fiction genre, a movie that truly kicked off the sci-fi craze of the 1950s and for the foreseeable decades, adapted from H.G. Wells' own classic that pioneered the alien invasion genre in the first place, and of course adapted by the movie legend George Pal, responsible for films like Destination Moon, When Worlds Collide, and even another H.G. Wells film adaptation, just to say the least, and directed flawlessly by Byron Haskin, a duo that worked effortlessly to produce a fine picture with absolutely stellar model work, sound and visual effects that would go on to be used for decades to come. With an impressive use of practical effects and its iconic and distinctive interpretation of the Martian war machines and the aliens that reside within. And starring movie legends Gene Barry and Anne Robinson at only the start of their careers. It's a pure classic and it's defined and shaped the decades of filmmaking that came after its release. The movie begins with an old-fashioned recap of the prior world wars in the 20th century, with a focus on how our technology has evolved over time, becoming more and more deadly due to the competitive nature of war, eventually reaching a peak unparalleled in our capacity for destruction, the nuclear bomb. An escalated and over-exaggerated monument of just how absurdly competitive we as a species can be. This right off the bat perfectly sets the tone for the entire movie. The movie is, at its heart, metaphorically centered around the paranoia and fears of nuclear annihilation at the hands of the Soviets during the Cold War. A tale where the good-hearted could do no wrong America faces annihilation at the hands of a raining bombardment from the sky, bringing an unstoppable force of death and destruction. Already this movie is taking the original concept of the War of the Worlds and brilliantly adapting it to the 1950s. The original book told a story about colonialism, and now, in the 1950s, the new social talk of the town was nuclear weapons and communism. There's the Martian creatures themselves. First, Sylvia sees one doing this weird dance as it walked. Then later, we see the actual inspiration for an iconic moment from E.T.
When I first got to meet Anne, we began talking. I said, Anne, you know, I did a real homage to you. I don't know if you realize this, but did you see E.T.? She said, of course, darling. And I said, well, remember the scene in E.T. where Elliot's looking out the window, he feels something strange in his heart because he's kind of feeling E.T.'s feelings, and suddenly E.T.'s hand comes in and just rests itself on Elliot's left shoulder. And I said, that was you and the Martian in War of the Worlds.
And we're properly introduced to a Martian, and it is absolutely grotesque with its muscular tumor looking body, its large, vile and squeamish blood veins and arteries, the slender bone-like arms and the huge bulging eye. I don't know if evolution can develop an eye like that, but just go with it. The most incredible thing about it, as you'd expect, is that the Martian is entirely made practically in the span of one night no less, and it was literally falling apart on set, and the veins pumping blood was done by blowing into tubes. But this incredible design and puppetry is what would later go on to help create masterpieces like The Fly. And yeah, you can see the obvious inspiration right here. But the Martians themselves though, outside of their machines, are revealed to be absolute wimps. It only takes Clayton throwing a piece of wood at the Martian to make it scream and just run off. I don't know how a thing like that can move with such speed on a planet with gravity 3 times stronger than its homeworld, but whatever. The interesting part about this scene, and also the most important thematically and literally narratively, is how it shows us just how weak and pathetic the Martians really are outside of their machines. They are entirely, completely reliant on their machines, just like the Martians in the book. Oh yeah, they are definitely curious and stupid enough to go into the house with no protection. They're arrogant and downright foolish, which, if you think about it, sets the stage perfectly for their downfall later on. It is odd to characterize an alien race as arrogant morons, but you can easily chalk it up to their potential history consisting of them enjoying total power and freedom, with literally no opposition until Mars became too inhospitable for them to live much longer. And then when they recognize the fact that the humans' technology is absolutely pitiful compared to them, whatever. Or you could say in another scenario, the Martians are these miserable life forms which spend day after day just working and working to keep their society, or whatever you can call their civilization, alive, just keeping the water channels flowing, keeping food production high even when the world is falling apart, constantly innovating technologically but degrading more socially and biologically, to the point they're just miserable life forms. So when they came to Earth, they were going to have a little fun. There was a lot of repressed emotions in there, and they wanted to lash out, because even though they're a species that act on logic, they live a lifestyle similar to ants, they do have emotions and they do have needs. And in a sense, that kind of also makes more sense as well. But in a way, I kind of see it as a mix of the two. I'm not going to say which interpretation is my favorite, or the one I think is the most true, is the speculation. Something the book does. The book literally leaves everything ambiguous, because the book is in the opinion and eyewitness account of one person for the most part. For me personally, the most interesting part about The War of the Worlds is that it's so up for interpretation, and because it's such an easy story to adapt into any time period, it's just one of those universal stories that I feel like can just fit with almost anything. But going with the arrogant moron theory, they give off the same arrogance as the British Empire when they invaded foreign lands for centuries in the past. I can't say this is accurate to the book's Martians. In the book, the Martians were in far fewer numbers. They were highly coordinated and calculated. Yes, the 50s Martians are as well, but what I mean is, the book Martians would not just stand there and let humans just bombard them with artillery. The book Martians were cautious, and they were quick and efficient, and they understood the risk. They did not treat humanity as just a pest to get rid of. They actually did deem humanity as a threat that they actually had to suppress. They couldn't just walk on into London and just hope for the best, expecting nothing to go wrong. No, they actually had to destroy infrastructure and destroy communication, and then start using the black smoke to utterly smother the countryside, to completely kill any form of military opposition. The Martians in the book, they were not really that risky or very arrogant. I can only really think of one occurrence in the book when the Martians kind of come across as arrogant, and that was when one of them just walks into a line of artillery and its head gets blown up.
Probably some form of magnetic flux, like invisible legs.
You mean the strings are lifting them? Yeah, okay, so as much as I really like these Martian war machines, and yeah, I'll just say this now, these designs are iconic. The manta shape, it's way more unique and, in my opinion, iconic than the usual flying saucers. This just gives off a more alien but at the same time technological vibe. It still gives off the same vibe as the tripods from the book for some reason, even though you could say they really don't have the same aesthetic at all, but I don't know, they just do to me. And I understand real tripods would have been far too much money. These War Machine models, they are really impressive. They are literal real models, as I've said, with their pulsating electronic eyes and the sound design of the Martians and the great colour they have. And I know they're technically tripods because of magnetic legs, but the strings are just far too noticeable for me, to the point that it was actually immersion breaking. Could say it's just a me problem. Honestly, every time I watch this film, it pulls me out of it. I imagine this wasn't a problem in the 1950s, and for a majority of people, it isn't for you as well. This is just a tiny thing that you just have to accept. It's like a stage performance. You have to give some leeway. And I understand some of the strings are also electric cables for the eyes and the motion and the pulsating electronics and all that stuff. But I honestly wish this movie got a new DVD release with digital fixes that would iron out these small little things, similar to the DVD release of Day of the Daleks.
Exterminate! Whoever is operating the time machine is an enemy of Daleks. All enemies of the Daleks must be destroyed. Exterminate them.
One last thing I actually want to point out is how eerily close this movie is, structurally, to the book. But I don't mean plot by plot, clearly not. This movie is not really that close to the book in terms of scene by scene basis, of course. I'm just talking about, in a way, the story itself jumps from different perspectives. In the book, the story very often jumped from foreboding narration to a first person account from either the protagonist or his brother in London, or explaining the military's tactics, their preparations, and speculating about the Martians. And it kind of goes back and forth from there to create a more well-rounded picture of the whole scenario taking place, just like this movie does if you think about it. What I'm trying to say though is that this movie kind of has the exact same sort of structure as the book in terms of how it explored and further fleshed out the scenario going on. If the Martians were successful at wiping out mankind, that's it. Our history, our religions, our triumphs, our everything is gone. And do you really think these Martians would care to preserve it? Maybe a few scientific lot, but there's been no evidence of Martians being like that. Sure, maybe, but we would still be gone. That soul, that drive, that passion that drives us to make art and music and all things like that, that's gone. That's never coming back. And I doubt a species so inept and compromised as the Martians would even think of integrating it into their own lives. So that's gone. Everything magical about mankind would be eradicated by these creatures who are entirely narrow-minded and arrogant. That's it. And that's kind of the vibe this film gives off near the end. But of course, when all seemed lost, just like in the book, the Martians began to die off. All over the world, not by our own weapons and devices, but by the littlest things that God had placed on our earth. The microbial kingdom, the millions of germs and bacteria and viruses all around us. They were what saved mankind in the end, as the Martians simply did not know about the dangers of the microbes all around us, leading to their inevitable demise all over the earth. Does this movie hold up today?
Oh, almost certainly.
Absolutely. There's a ton of instantly iconic moments that are all incredibly and excellently crafted, and it's a great adaptation of H.G.'s story. But like I previously stated, this film needs a digital remaster, because as much as I love the Martians design in this film, The strings are far too noticeable not to be distracting. The thing about this ending is that it is the perfect conclusion after everything the film has built up. The Martians were built up as this impossible force. They were simply too proud, too stupid to even think of the germs on Earth, and do you want to know something? They probably just didn't even know about the germs, to be honest. They would have known the dangers if they had bothered to research Earth more, which, yeah, I guess that's the moral of the story. Do more research and you won't screw up. But no, for real, the real moral of this story is just don't be arrogant, don't be selfish. Don't deem others like you as inferior just because they are not as fortunate or powerful as you. Don't underestimate people, and don't judge a book by its cover, I guess, because I doubt these Martians had any expectation or really understand any value in humanity's morals or art or just anything about them, really. Instead, be cooperative with others. In the end, it was humanity's cooperative nature and belief in anything but absolute selfish power was what saved them in the end. It's a brilliant and fantastic ending, and what else can I really say about this film? It's possible with the Martians, and very likely in fact, that in universe, Mars did not develop microbes on the planet, or at least not the same way as Mars, or possibly the Martians entirely wiped out bacteria on their planet centuries ago in pursuit of their total planetary domination, which, if that's true, that hilariously doomed them in advance actually, as over the centuries they eventually forgot, they just forgot germ theory. I suppose, yeah, this fits thematically. Both work either way. Either you go with this, or they just didn't bother research Earth enough or take humanity seriously. Well, the Earth seriously. Compared to the book, Wells's Martians are definitely a bit more intelligent, but that just comes down to necessity. The Martians were simply just not as powerful in the book than they are in the 1953 one, so by pure necessity, Wells's Martians had to be more smart, and they had to, in a sense, respect humanity's military capabilities so they would be able to coordinate their moves more effectively. Keep in mind the book Martians also only invaded England as well and only sent 10 cylinders. Anyway, before I give my proper conclusion to this review, I'm just going to give a random final part of the review because I want to. I wonder what would have happened after the events of the film. One thing's for sure, Better Dead Than Red would take on a whole new meaning. This would be a world that would be far more crippled than it already was after World War II. And now that mankind is fully aware of the dangers of space, and especially Mars, the world would direct its attention entirely to the stars. A full-on militarization of space travel would take place. They would do anything they could think of to combat the Martian threat or any threat from space. They would probably be far more cooperative with each other too, which you could say is a good thing or a bad thing. Mankind would undoubtedly turn to developing biological weaponry, possibly on a massive scale. And since there's possibly dozens of destroyed Martian machines and cylinders scattered across the globe, mankind could theoretically reverse engineer the technology and develop their own kind. And since the Martians back on Mars can't really go to Earth to collect samples to create any vaccines for their population, they pretty much cannot do anything. In fact, if the Martians eradicated their own bacteria, possibly thousands of years ago, then the Martians probably wouldn't even have an immune system to begin with. And even then, this is all assuming the Martians could even figure out why their invasion forces suddenly all died out. By necessity, I suppose they could, and they probably would. But you know what? This is also assuming that the Martians weren't stupid enough to send their entire race at once. But I actually wouldn't put it past them at all. Theoretically, they could go to Earth and, sterilize the environment, but then they would have to just live in massive domes and colonies, and I bet that's what they're doing on Mars already. They would just be trading one hostile crap hole for another. And Earth may be even more difficult to contain because pandemics would be rampant. All it would take is just one strand of bacteria, and that could be 90% of the Martian species just dead. Would humanity be able to fight back against the Martians and actually defeat them? Would the USSR ever even collapse? Would the 21st century be completely different? Would it be better or worse? Would it be more cooperative and innovative when it comes to medical sciences, space travel, and military applications? But would it also be far more controlling and oppressive? Would pride and arrogance take over mankind the same way the Martians succumbed to it? Would they become slaves to their own ingenuity? We can honestly only hope humanity keeps its values into the distant future to retain its morals, I suppose. If there really is nothing divine or powerful or really mighty about the universe, if it is just matter and atoms, then the only real thing special that we really know about the universe is of course the spectacle, but it's only a spectacle because we can experience it. We make art, we experience emotion, love, hate. Anyway, that's it. What else is there really to say about this film except that it's a thrilling and exciting and excellent, amazingly made, that's not a word, adaptation of an impeccable book. The acting is great all around, the model work, the special effects are absolutely amazing for the time. The music and staging really helps add dimension to every scene, whether that be a dark, claustrophobic scene, a manic and surreal fight, a depressing last hope in the face of inevitable extinction, or it can be as simple as adding a sense of comfort and familiarity and security with a more relaxed and playful, just scene at the fun scenes at the beginning. As stupid as this sounds, the beginning part of this film is my favourite because it's just so fun to watch and so wholesome. But yeah, one thing I'll say is that I kind of consider this film the Raiders of the Lost Ark of the 1950s. I don't know, it kind of gives off that same vibe, and I mean the vibe of it being such a articulate and precise picture in every fundamental aspect of what makes it whole. The acting, the music, the staging, the cinematography, just every piece, the model work definitely, and the more innovative effects that would go on to change filmmaking for decades, and that's kind of the way I see it in a sense. I recommend buying this particular DVD. This DVD is actually pretty cool with a lot of bonus features, including commentary from the people who worked on the film and mini documentaries on H.G. Wells himself and the creation of the 1953 film itself. But if you have interest in War of the Worlds, I recommend getting this DVD just for the documentaries themselves, and never mind because YouTube probably has them anyways, but whatever. Still, if you're watching this and you're a War of the Worlds fan, chances are you probably already have a DVD copy. These mini documentaries really go into far more detail about certain things than I did. I love being able to articulate my thoughts about these films in video form, and not just the films, just any adaptation of War of the Worlds. My mind is always racing with thoughts and topics of discussion regarding these War of the Worlds adaptations, so being able to do this was actually a great way to get out of my system, I guess. And that's probably the reason why these videos are so long, because I have just too much to talk about. I will be honest now, the only reason why the 2005 movie is as short as it is because I made a deliberate attempt to try and make a more concise and compact video compared to my first attempt at a video essay. But this time I just wanted to just do what just felt the most right and what would be the most fun. Anyhow, thanks for watching.